in front and rear. It was a great day of celebration. We moved into that council house, and all of this was as a result of a Labour government. A Labour government under Attlee and then under Harold Wilson and Jim Callaghan. They introduced the welfare state, built the council houses that we needed, gave us a great free education. Everything that Labour governments have done to improve the lives of working people is under attack by successive Tory governments. We shouldn't have a situation where people are having to go to food banks, and we shouldn't have children living in poverty on the scale that we do, even though their parents are in work. I want future generations to have the same chances that I had, because in that way, not only can you improve the lives of those individual kids, actually improve the lives of our whole community, because they'll contribute something back. And all those policies that Jeremy Corbyn has put forward about building more homes, ending the privatisation of the NHS, investing in education, investing in our infrastructure so it creates jobs, all of those policies can combine to restoring people's optimism in their futures, in the future of this country. We need a Labour government that will rebuild our country, transform our country, so nobody and no community is ever left behind again.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lucy Powell, John McDonnell and our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
Wow. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Lucy Powell. I was, until a few days ago, the Member of Parliament for Manchester Central, now the candidate for Manchester Central. And I know what you're all thinking. I mean, what is she doing here? A Mancunian in Liverpool, a Man City fan in Liverpool. I know, right, not helping myself here, but I'm sure you'll all make me feel very welcome. But that's because today is about the North speaking with one voice. And our great cities might have a historic rivalry, but when it comes to fighting our corner for real investment, for real focus on the North, we speak with one voice, our two great cities, and we're absolutely together. And today is very exciting, and it's a very significant event in this election. And Jeremy and John choosing to make rebalancing our economy and ending the North-South divide an absolutely central tenet of their economic policy cannot be understated. Because despite having brilliant people and beautiful places and communities, a child from the North is less likely to be school-ready than their southern counterpart. Being born in the North can take a decade off your life. Young people in the South are 40% more likely to achieve the top grades in GCSEs. Our wages are lower too. And compared to London and the South East, our transport infrastructure is absolutely rubbish, let's be honest. So for all their talk of a northern powerhouse, the Tories don't care about the North, and they just don't understand us, do they? And that's why today's announcement of a northern-based social transformation fund is so necessary and welcome. I'd even be happy for it to be based here in Liverpool. I'm that keen on it. And that's why, comrades, we need real change. We need a Labour government, and we need our next speaker to be the next Prime Minister of our country, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and it's utterly fantastic to be in a city I absolutely love, Liverpool. What a great place, and what a fantastic atmosphere there always is. And being here at the Invisible Wind Factory. I'm struggling as to why it's called the Invisible Wind Factory. I've asked those sitting around me, and the intellectual response was, I haven't got a clue. So if somebody can enlighten me as to why it's called the Invisible Wind Factory, I'd be delighted. But a centre for arts, music and dancing is fantastic, and that's really what the spirit of Liverpool and Merseyside is about. Emma Goldman said, "If I can't dance, it's not my revolution." What a fantastic quote to have to start our event off here today. I want to say thank you to all of the Labour candidates that are here today from all across the region. Thank you for what you're doing, and I look forward to you being in the next Parliament as part of a Labour majority. And I want to say a big thank you to Joe Anderson and Steve Rotherham for being here today, the Mayor of Liverpool and the Mayor of Liverpool City Region. One of the retiring Tory MPs said he was a recovering politician. Steve's recovering well from the trauma of 2 years working with me as PPS when I was first elected leader. Steve, thanks for all you did there, and thanks for what you do as our City Region Mayor. The atmosphere at the start of this election campaign is absolutely electric. I've been in 14 constituencies already, and the numbers of people coming out to work and support and campaign for Labour is already much greater than it was at the start of the 2017 election. Our party and our members are so up for this fight and so up for this battle that we're going to win this election. And we're going to win it because we offer something very different. I don't suppose there's too many people in this audience that read the Daily Telegraph. I mean, it's all right. I mean, if you do it privately, it's fine. I fully understand these things. But it started with a really bizarre front page yesterday with Boris Johnson defending billionaires. Well, I'm sure there are billionaires that need defending, but personally, I don't know any. In fact, I don't know any billionaires. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage there. But it then ended up with a government minister complaining that Labour was dehumanising politicians by complaining about what a very prominent person said about Grenfell. Grenfell was a disaster waiting to happen and a wholly preventable loss of life. And I think we should show sympathy for those families that have lost loved ones, but also offer security for the 60,000 people still living in blocks of flats that have the same cladding as was there at Grenfell. And I tell you what, a Labour government wouldn't stand by. We would act immediately to remove that dangerous cladding. And so, when families complain about living in a death trap and residents' warnings are ignored and survivors have to wait years to get rehoused, it shows me that something badly has gone wrong, and that is dehumanising our politics. We'll do things very, very differently. We want to invest so that no community is left behind. As Lucy pointed out, there are massive imbalances between the north and south of this country and the east and west of this country. Levels of investment are very high in transport infrastructure in London and the southeast, very low in the northeast, northwest, Yorkshire, and across much of the Midlands. If you take a train from here to Hull, it takes a very long time. You could get to London and well beyond in the same time it takes to get to Hull by train from Liverpool. And so we will be investing all across the north. And we'll be investing through a green industrial revolution. I pay tribute to the work that's been done on Merseyside for the work on the Mersey Barrage, and we will be developing a green industrial revolution that will create thousands of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs across this country. But it's also about funding our NHS and our schools and taxing people fairly to achieve it. So our tax plans, which John will outline, will affect 5% of the population. The rest of the population will benefit from it because I believe there's so much unfairness in Britain, it's time to change course and change tack. And we'll be supporting our National Health Service, and all the evidence we've got is that this government is happy to sell our NHS out to the USA, happy to do a trade deal with Donald Trump, which could end up with us sending 500 million of NHS money to big US drugs corporations. I just make it very, very clear. Under Labour, our NHS is not for sale to anybody. And so, in the winter election of 2019, when you vote on December the 12th or earlier if you vote by post, you've got a choice ahead of you. A choice of whether you continue austerity and underfunding of our public services, you stand by on the other side while more people become rough sleepers, you watch our children growing up in poverty, and you watch the brutality of universal credit hitting the very poorest. And for those in work, in middle age, going deeper into debt in order to fund social care for their parents and university education for their children? Or do we say, in the fifth richest country in the world, we can do things differently and better? That we can achieve that level of equality that is possible. We can invest in our public services. We can create the jobs for the future. And we will have secretaries of state and government ministers that get it, that understand it, that are rooted in those communities that will benefit from everything that a Labour government will bring. And I'm very proud now to ask you to put your hands together to welcome somebody who is, as you all know, a very close friend of mine. And as close friends do, you can argue all the time. The whole time. I have still not quite got over the football question with John McDonnell, but that will come later. But in John, we've got somebody who has literally changed the economic debate in this country by force of nature and force of argument. We're no longer debating the merits or otherwise of austerity. We're now debating the necessity of investing in a future to care for those that need the support and care that they deserve, but also to create a society that's absolutely fit for the next generation. And so, it's with great pride and great pleasure I welcome a lad from Liverpool who had a sojourn in Norfolk, ended up in London, but keeps coming back to Merseyside all the time because he absolutely loves Merseyside and Liverpool, and somebody who I think is going to be an historic Chancellor of the Exchequer. In the same mould as those great Chancellors of the Exchequer that the post-war Labour government had. Read, if you've got time, their speeches in introducing the budgets of 45, 46, 47, 48. In the midst of all the post-war problems they had, their whole narrative was about dealing with the poverty and injustice and lost opportunities for so many millions of people in Britain at that time. And their force of nature brought us the National Health Service. John's force of nature will bring us the National Education Service, will bring us that investment, that decency, that equality within our society. John, thank you for all you've done, and thank you for all you will do when we've won the election. John McDonnell.
Thanks a lot, comrade. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Look, that's really nice of you. Look, if we can stick together as a partnership after penalty shootouts, that shows you how committed we are to this cause. Look, it's good to be home. It's good to be home again in these, as Jeremy said, in the city of my birth. My Scouse predecessors, like so many others in this city, were originally economic migrants. They came across the sea from Drogheda looking for work, looking for the work so they could work themselves, to be frank, out of poverty. And my goodness, they worked. Just down the road from here, my granddad and my dad worked on the docks. I can still remember as a youngster, my dad coming home. He always used to have, some of you remember, that hook hanging from his belt. The hook that he used to grip bales as they were loaded on and off the ship on the Mersey. Thousands of tons of goods going in and out of this port every day, providing thousands of jobs, keeping thousands of families just above the watermark. Yeah, until the jobs dried up. And like so many other families, my family moved south looking for work. What happened to the Liverpool docks and to Liverpool is what happened to so many cities and communities right the way across the north and Britain. Traditional industries declined and little was done to replace them. Old skills were lost and new skills were just not invested in. Do you know, successive Labour governments did. They really tried to engage and invest, only to see their efforts swept aside when every Tory government was elected. And I know that people here, especially in Liverpool, will remember the last time the Tories were in charge and the damage they did, not just to this city, but right the way across the north. Communities were smashed apart. Pride ripped out of towns and cities right the way across the country. There was an arrogant complacency, neglect, and a lack of care that summed up, can you remember the phrase? There is no alternative, they told us. It was just the sort of nature of economic change, as if change always meant fewer jobs or worse paid jobs. The Tories are always the same. In the 80s, it was dole queues and sky-high inflation. Now it's zero-hours contracts, universal credit, and queues outside food banks. If they win again, it will just be more of the same. They're planning to slash inheritance tax and taxes for the richest, despite, I just give the example of a ever-deepening crisis in our care homes and a crumbling public transport system. And there'll be a hard right Tory Brexit smashing a hole in our public finances. Do you know, they treat us with contempt. They think people are stupid. They think that with Brexit on the agenda, they think we'll all forget about the last 9 years and the prospect of another 5 years if they get back. But whatever they say, there is an alternative. The chance to change things dramatically and permanently for the better. So Labour's message is one, exactly as Jeremy said, time and time again. It's a one of hope. And our hope is an ambition and a concrete objection that we will, yes, we will end the attitude that there is no alternative, and we'll replace it with the words we've been discussing over the last few years, one of hope, that another world is possible. And it's not just possible, it's necessary, and under a Labour government, it's in sight. Because this election isn't just about the next 12 months. 12 months of the Brexit withdrawal agreement, or even about the next 5 years. It's about the next 10 years. It's about future generations and the future of our country, and yes, the future of our planet. Everything we hold dear, a once-in-a-generation chance to get back on track, remake this country, transform everyone's lives for the better. I haven't got a rose-tinted view of the past. I still remember the conditions my family first lived in. And yes, how hard it was for my parents, like so many others. Well, hard to work just to get by. But this city and this country have a proud record, a proud industrial history, which has been taken away by successive Tory governments. And after years of being held back, those cities and towns like Liverpool, like Manchester, and the smaller towns in the northwest, all of them require radical change to undo the damage that's been done by the Tories. Our aim as a Labour government is to achieve what past Labour governments have aspired to: an irreversible shift in the balance of power and wealth in favour of working people. And that means change, real change. And it means investment on a scale never seen before in this country, and certainly never seen before in the north and outside of London and the southeast. So to achieve that objective, it also requires, therefore, an irreversible shift in the centre of gravity in political decision-making, as well as investment in this country, from its location solely in London to be relocated to the north and regions and nations of this country. So on the scale of change investment needed, I can tell you that, let me just explain, Labour's National Transformation Fund will be bigger than even we promised in 2017. For the areas that haven't had their fare for years, will deliver, yes, £250 billion of investment here and around the country over the next 10 years, our Green Transformation Fund, upgrading our energy and transport and other networks. It's to meet our targets and decarbonise as thoroughly as we can and as fast as we can to a just transition. I welcome the launch today of the Manifesto for the North. It was splashed across all the papers. Let me say to all those who supported the Manifesto for the North, all those leaders and councillors and others, the mayors, all those local communities, all those newspaper editors, a Labour government will provide the resources and the powers to enable its implementation. And yes, including Crossrail for the North, that we can have a decent transport system once again in this area. But it's not just the natural world that's been neglected. So we'll also commit to an additional £150 billion in a new social transformation fund. And it will be spent over the first 5 years of our Labour government. The Social Transformation Fund will begin the urgent task of repairing our social fabric that's been torn apart by the Tories. £150 billion to replace and upgrade and expand our schools, our hospitals, care homes, and yes, council homes once again under a Labour government. And it's to deal with the human emergency which has been created by the Tories over the last 9 years, alongside, yes, the climate emergency. They're the twin challenges, but they're opportunities as well for our country, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to upgrade our infrastructure for good. It's because we have no other choice. We have to do it. If we're to stand any chance whatsoever of tackling climate change, if we're to stand any chance of providing a decent quality of life for all our people, yes, and also if we're ever to bring our communities back together again. And we have to act now, and we have to act big, and we have to act decisively. So all of these initiatives will be linked in a comprehensive programme to transform our economy and people's lives. Those who need jobs, linked with the need to actually create and build the new wind turbines. Those with new ideas for green technologies, linked with the areas where manufacturing investment has become for many a memory of your grandparents. That means making sure we transition away from fossil fuels to green energy sources, that those new jobs are located in communities where they're needed, within the investment in skills to go alongside the investment in infrastructure. Not like now building wind farms in Scotland with components shipped in from around half the world, whilst yards making the same components stand idle in Fife. It means bringing 27 million. It means bringing 27 million homes across the country up to efficiency energy standards, saving everyone money on their bills and, yes, at the same time reducing our carbon footprint. It means a national investment bank and a network of regional development banks, including one for the North West, using the power of government to raise money nationally and internationally, and new banks, including our Post Bank, to pass on those resources into the hands of communities themselves. But it's not just about spending more, it's about how that money is spent, with decision-making devolved down to local communities. So we'll carve out part of the National Transformation Fund for a local transformation fund in each of England's regions, with money for devolved governments as well, of course. And that money will be ring-fenced for infrastructure projects, decided and developed at the local level, with decisions made transparently and democratically in each region. The decisions will be made here by local people, local decision makers, about how those funds are allocated. It's you who know best how to tackle the issues facing your community. There'll be regional officers of government departments overseen by a board of local, county and city council leaders. With that board publicly accountable to open meetings, to local councillors, trade unions and business leaders alike. They'll be supported by a National Transformation Fund unit of the Treasury. I can confirm that this powerful section of the Treasury unit will be based here in the north. There's a rumour going round that it'll be as close to Anfield as possible. At the same time, my Treasury ministerial team are here. Our meetings will no longer solely be in London. Labour's Treasury ministers will meet outside of London. We'll have a ministerial office in the north as well. What does this mean? What does this mean? It means this, that the centre of political gravity is shifting away from London. It's coming back home to the north. This is where the investment is needed, and this is where the decisions on that investment need to be made on the ground. Power is coming back home, but it's coming back to the people. We can only deliver real change, the change we need, by putting power in the hands of local communities, of the people who their local area the best. Yes, a good example, Stevie's here, Stevie Rotherham's here. Like those who came up with the idea of the tidal barrage across the Mersey. Yes, which I tell you, we'll build, and we'll build it together. It won't just be public investment, of course. We can't do it if the private finance sector is not pulling its weight too. So the days of the city dictating the terms to the rest of the country are over. They're over. The finance sector will be brought in line with the rest of us in tackling the emergency that we face, with an end to short-termist thinking, the thinking that only prices risks associated with an investment here and now, rather than the potential for dramatic change in the price of carbon investments. And it leads to this concept of stranded assets that undermine the whole ability to invest securely for the long term. There's not just short-term thinking of the finance sector that needs to change. Nothing shows the short-sighted short-termism of the Tories more than their approach to university tuition. We know it will cost money to make tuition free again, to scrap tuition frees. And we're upfront about that. We've costed it in our grey book at the last election, and we will this election. But the Office of Budget Responsibility restated forecast, which was meant to be published today, was expected to show tens of billions more borrowing, because the Tories designed an expensive student loan system that hid the costs off the books. They got caught out in the end. Too late, though, for the millions who racked up tens of thousands in debt, youngsters in debt as a result of eye-watering interest rates. That's what happens when you design fiscal rules to minimise the costs on one side of the balance sheet, ignoring the benefits on the other. Labour won't make that mistake. And I can tell you that our fiscal rule for the next Parliament will exclude borrowing for investment for borrowing targets. It will mandate us to deliver an improvement in the overall balance sheet by the end of the Parliament, so that when we invest in the infrastructure our country desperately needs, it's recognised on both as a cost but also as a benefit. And yes, adding to the government's debt, but also adding to the government's assets and strengthening our public sector to deal with the future. With the rents of our new council homes and the electricity produced by our energy public agencies set against the cost of securing the debt issued to build them. And a ceiling on that debt servicing cost in normal times of 10% of tax revenue. On this, at least there's nothing radical. It's just common sense. What families and businesses do every day when weighing up an investment. After the corruption and lies of the Tories, we need government and those who want to be in government to be transparent as possible. So today is just the start. We'll lay out our tax and spending plans as we go along, and in our fully costed manifesto, underpinned by a cutting-edge fiscal rule that enables us to borrow for productive investment. So this choice in this election isn't just clear, it's historic. On the one hand, the Tories, the very people who have just inflicted a decade of harsh, brutal and unnecessary austerity cuts on our community. The people who starved our NHS, our schools, our police budgets of the resources they need. These are the people who all of a sudden are now gushing with election stunt offers of spending more. They just take us for fools, don't they? Judge them on their record and their actions, not on their election gimmick false promises. And we know, particularly in this city, you can't trust a word they say. You know if they get back, we all risk 5 more years of cuts, falling wages, Trump trade deals, selling out our NHS, and a rising state pension age. Their ambition, a state pension age of 75. On the other hand, we have the chance now of real change. A decade spent rebuilding our society and saving our planet for our children and our grandchildren, building the homes we need, investing to create the well-paid jobs secure with trade union rights restored, creating clean, green energy and transport networks. That change begins, yes, with voting Labour and electing a Labour government with Jeremy Corbyn at its helm. And it will carry on long after. until we create a radically transformed society with restored pride in every part of the country. Real change, made permanent and delivered together. The first step is on December the 12th, and we're coming. Solidarity.
Losing my poppy there. Wow, that was a fantastic speech with some great content, really exciting policies there. So we're now going to take a few questions, but first of all, can I just ask the members in the audience, we're going to take a few questions first of all from the media, and we're going to do so respectfully and in a patient way, if that's okay, because we're really proud of those policies that have been announced today, and so we want them to be scrutinised, we want them to be covered by the media, and that means allowing the media some time to ask John some questions. So I'll come to you after I've taken a few of those, if that's okay, if everyone could just be patient. Even if you don't like the question being asked, we are going to listen to it and answer it respectfully. Now, John, I know, is doing some broadcast interviews, so particularly keen to hear from press colleagues as well. So I'll take 3 questions, first of all, from the media, if you can show who wants to ask a question. Faisal, I'll take one from you, and Tom, and the gentleman, yes, the gentleman there, Faisal.
Faisal Islam, BBC. Shadow Chancellor, just down East Lancs Road, the Chancellor has been making some arguments with echoes of what you say, saying that low interest rates are an advantage to invest. He seems to be targeting tens of billions rather than hundreds of billions in investment. Doesn't the scale of what you want to do, doesn't that risk scaring the markets and putting up those interest rates that you're relying on being low?
Okay, I'm going to take another 2. So Tom from Sky.
Mr McDonnell, this is an extraordinary amount of money that you are proposing to invest. Can you just set out to us whether or not these figures or these ambitions would change if Labour were voted in as a government, that you had a successful renegotiation of the Brexit deal, that there was the referendum that you are proposing, and that the UK voted on that Labour Brexit to leave the UK? Would that have any impact on what you are proposing?
Okay, and one more. The gentleman with the glasses. Yeah, the gentleman with the glasses there. Just say who you are. Ooh.
Hello, Mr McDonnell. Dan Bloom from the Daily Mirror. You've said yourself a lot of this money is going into housing. Is that going to add to, increase Labour's existing target for the number of homes you've built? And just quickly, if I may, after last night's events, do you think the next deputy leader of the party has to be a woman?
On the last one, I'm always in favour of gender balance. Let me take Faisal's point. What happened down the road a short while ago in the Chancellor's speech, actually I think it was a bit of a tragedy, because what he did, and what he did last night as well, it was almost as though he became a climate change denier. Last night, in his correspondence with the Bank of England, he removed the climate change references that had been there previously. So in other words, he was trying to say to the Bank of England that climate change doesn't seem to matter. And at the same time this morning, he's put forward a miserable amount of investment, which will go, it basically means we will not meet our climate change targets. We're facing an emergency. He seems to deny it, not even acknowledge it on the scale of investment that he's putting forward. We will not be able to meet, on that basic level of investment, our climate change targets. And he's putting at risk future generations. That's unacceptable. In terms of the levels of borrowing, there's no shortage at the moment. With the low interest rates that we've got, there's no shortage of demand for government bonds across the world. You know as well as I do, the IMF, the World Bank, and others now are saying now's the time to borrow to invest. And if we don't do that, we'll be faced with continuing levels of poverty, undermining our productivity. Already, the lack of our productivity is going backwards in this country. In France and Germany, they produce in 4 days what we produce in 5. We're just not competing anymore as a result of that lack of investment. And at the same time, if you don't invest on this scale, we'll continue with families being brought up, children living in containers rather than have a decent roof over their heads. 125,000 children living in temporary accommodation. Unacceptable in the 5th largest country and 1st largest economy in the world, isn't it? Totally unacceptable. And at the same time, we'll fail to protect our planet. Our scale of investment matches the scale of the emergencies that we now face, both climate change and social. And I tell you, if we didn't do this, if we didn't step up to that mark, future generations would never forgive us. That's why we need to do it. In terms of what happens with regard to Brexit, we'll ensure that when we go into government, we will negotiate a deal that will protect jobs and the economy, and we'll put that back to the British people, and they will have a genuine choice between a sensible Brexit option to leave and at the same time the choice to remain. Do you know, we have faith in people. So our commitment is, yes, we'll protect our communities, we'll protect the economy, we'll protect their jobs, we'll protect their living standards, and whatever deal we seal will enable us to go ahead with our programme, whether it's a deal or whether it's remain. And our key commitment is, let the people decide. Let the people decide. On the scale of investment we've put forward, it will enable us to complete our objectives in terms of house building. So this will give us the 100,000 a year, the level of house building that we need, the council housing, the social housing, the housing associations that will be. We'll publish the details of our programme in our manifesto. And again, the detail of all our costings will be there and will enable people, yes, to, I think, have confidence that once again we'll be a country that can house its people. Because at the moment, we have a government that's failed to house its people, failed to feed its people, failed to deliver employment which lifts people out of poverty, and failed, yes, tragically, as we've seen in many of our areas, to give them the basic levels of security against rising crime. Will transform our society.
I'm just going to take a few more questions from the media, and I will come to members soon, so don't worry. Romilly, I think you're indicating, and yeah, the gentleman there. Are you from the media? Yeah, okay, I'll take one from you then.
Thank you. Romilly Weeks, ITV News. Mr McDonnell, you're urging people to think of the choice before them when they vote. Why has Ian Austin and the Jewish Chronicle both decided that that choice must not be Labour?
Okay, and the gentleman, now we said we'd be respectful. We're going to take questions. Gentleman here next to Dan.
Thank you very much, John. From The Guardian, Peter Walker. Overnight, there was an announcement of a kind of mini-electoral pact between Plaid, the Greens and the Lib Dems. And obviously, the opinion polls are looking like a hung parliament is a possibility. Could you explain why Labour didn't decide to do any pacts like that? And if you think something like that could have maybe helped prevent another Conservative government.
Okay, and one more question from the gentleman here.
Hi, William James from Reuters. John, I'm sorry to go on about it. You've talked in the past about wanting to foment the overthrow of capitalism. The Conservatives would describe you as a Marxist. I'm interested in what label you would put on this model of economics that you've outlined today.
Yeah, okay. Let me start with that one. Do you know, in this room you'll be able to talk to others, but I think we stand in the best tradition of British socialism, in which we want to ensure... If you listen... Jeremy said go back and read some of the speeches of past chancellors, like Hugh Dalton. His autobiography is a phenomenal piece of work. Look at what happened. Gordon Brown, his commitment to lift children out of poverty. We stand in that tradition of socialism. And all of them had a shared ambition with us, which was to change the world. And that means changing and transforming this economic system that so betrayed our people. It cannot be right that this economic system... It cannot be right. Well, this economic system, which some people think is the perfect way to operate our economy, and we have 1.6 million food parcels handed out through food banks last year to people, many of whom are in work. All right? I don't believe that whatever smears and all the rest will come from some elements of the right-wing media or whatever. I think people will cut through all that, because what we're addressing is their daily lives. How we can tackle, yes, levels of poverty, but also even those, you know, we've got 4.5 million children in poverty. 2/3 of them are in families where someone's at work. What does that say about wages? But even, you know, even those on relatively good incomes and wages, you talk to them, and the pressure and stress that our economic system burdens them with. And you know, I've been going around the city, it's been called the tea offensive, except a free lunch or maybe a cup of tea. And you know, I've been meeting some of the highest earners in the country. They don't want to come outside their offices and step over a homeless person. When they go home, they want police and security in their communities as well. So what we're doing is we're going to transform this economic system so it works for everyone, not just a small elite. That's what we call socialism. And you know, this issue around pacts, etc. Look, let's be clear, we're going to have a majority Labour government. We don't need any pacts. We don't need any pacts. But I just say this to those Greens and others who are getting into bed with the Lib Dems. I remember what the Lib Dems did when they were in government. I remember. I say to those, go and ask any disabled person in this country who went through the brutality of the work capability assessment. Go and ask some of the families of disabled people who never survived as a result of that. We will never enter pacts, coalitions, or deals like that, ever. We will go into government. Let me just say this about some of the statements made by a former Labour MP this morning. He's now employed by the Tories. What else do you expect him to do in an election campaign where you're employed by the Tories, you speak on behalf of the Tories? That's what this was about this morning. On the issue of what's happened in the Jewish media over the last week or so, Of course we're saddened by it. Of course we're saddened by it. But we're doing everything actually they asked of us. We're doing everything asked of us to address this issue. Yes, it was a tiny number, less than 1/10% of the issues in terms of our membership, but it doesn't matter. One anti-Semite is too many within our movement. That's why we've done everything we can. Jenny Formby, our General Secretary, has introduced new procedures to dealing with them in terms of disciplinary processes. We've done that, and we've been rapid and, yes, at times ruthless. But also we've done exactly as they asked of us. We've introduced an education programme independently designed to raise the level of awareness of anti-Semitism, not just within our party, but more importantly within all of society. But I tell you, go and ask the Tories what they're doing about racism within their own party. So, how dare the Tories raise the issue of racism at all when they have a leader who has consistently, in his journalistic career, written statements which are racist in themselves.
Thank everybody for their continued patience. We can take one more round from the media, and then I'm going to come to members in the room. Are there any more members of the press or the media who want to ask questions? If not, I shall move on. Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you to the rest of the audience for your patience.
Can we just thank the journalists?
Yes, thank you very much to the journalists. Even you, Quentin, you're looking sharp, but even you, even the Daily Mail will thank. Right, I'll take some questions from members here. We've also got some of our fantastic candidates, who I think one of whom wants to ask a question. The lady in the glasses there, I'll come to you first. And yes, the lady here, and the gentleman here in the blue coat. We'll take them as a round of three. So the lady in the glasses, you've got a mic behind you there. Thank you.
Thanks. We've got a housing crisis at the moment in this country that we see hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. But we also see people of my generation who can't afford houses and we're stuck in private rented accommodation due to lack of council houses. So what is this Labour government going to do to tackle this?
Okay. And your name, sorry?
Elizabeth Hayden.
Elizabeth on housing. Okay, and now we're going to hear from Kim Johnson, who is our new candidate for the constituency that we're in today, which is Liverpool Riverside.
Well, we all know how despicable the Tories are, but they've outshone themselves this week with Jacob Rees-Mogg in terms of him trashing the memory of the Grenfell victims who perished in that awful fire, by him stating that they did not have the common sense to leave that building, suggesting that he is an elitist, that they didn't know any better. And my question is, should he be asked to leave his position and to get off the green benches that he so often lolls all over?
Yeah, brilliant question. I look forward to sharing those green benches with you, hopefully in a few weeks' time. And finally, the gentleman here in blue.
Welcome home, John, and our next Prime Minister. I was interested in your talk on the devolution funding and government departments in this area. You alluded to the need for private investment also in this area. How would you incentivise that and direct and control it?
Yeah, okay. On that last point, what's been interesting, I've been touring around, as I said, the city, but also meeting with pension funds and others. And what's interesting, that we're on the same page when it comes to the scale of investment that's needed to tackle the emergency in terms of the climate, but also the emergency in terms of our public services as well. And I don't think there's any dearth of investors wanting to come in. But what they want to see is the security of its state investment going alongside it. And when they also want to know that plans and prospectuses are being developed at the local level that are deliverable. And the best deliverable plans are the ones that are made in the local community. So I think there'll be the opportunities, not just for government investment, so state funding, but alongside that large-scale private investment, because it will marry up. And we've been looking at examples of what's been happening elsewhere. For example, in Canada, the local government pension scheme there works alongside local authorities to invest in the local infrastructure. But alongside infrastructure investment, you have to have revenue investment as well, and that's about education and skills training as well. So make sure we train up our workforce, because we're not going to be like the Tories, who boast about the number of jobs there are, and then you look at those jobs, they're low-paid, insecure, and to be honest, they're jobs that put people under an awful lot of pressure as well. What we want is high-skilled, high-paid jobs that are secure for the long term, and that's what we'll do. Imagine retrofitting homes in terms of insulation, solar panels, heat pumps. We're talking about a workforce need of 200,000 just to do that, but in addition to that, the potential of another 200,000 in the supply chain. That's the sort of creativity that we want. And it's happening elsewhere, but we're lagging behind because we have a government ideologically averse to any investment from the state on any scale. And we saw that this morning. I think that wasn't just a disappointing speech from the Chancellor, it was a betrayal of our country's future this morning in that speech. In terms of... Look, my voice has been going a bit. It's never recovered since Madrid. I'm sorry about that. In terms of renters, what we've said is what we want is long-term secure tenancies. That's the first thing. But the second thing as well, we want to give local authorities the powers, if necessary, to control rents within their areas as well. And do you know, people think this is radical. It's not radical. It happens right the way across Europe. And we used to have a fair rent system in this country so that people weren't exploited. It was related to what people could afford and what they earned. But actually, in the long term, the reality is they may be short-term measures, but the long-term issue is about building the homes that we need. The more homes we build, the more opportunities there are to, yes, and buy and rent, and that reduces prices. This housing demand that we have now is not some plague. It's as a result of the lack of governments building council homes. It's as simple as that, and we will build them. In terms of Jacob Rees-Mogg, don't get me going. Well, let me just say this. Jeremy and I have been going on the silent walks of the Grenfell families, and the firefighters come along with us as well. It is incredibly moving and, yeah, distressing, actually. And remember, it was Jeremy who was the... Can you remember that scene when Jeremy went down to Grenfell soon afterwards and just embraced people? That's what MPs should be doing, embracing them and supporting them, not using derogatory language in the way that Jacob Rees-Mogg did. And I tell you, what does it show you? It shows you they have no idea how we live. They have no idea how ordinary working people feel. And they, through their sense of entitlement, this elite, to be frank, patronise us, look down upon us, and when they get power, walk all over us. That society will come to an end on December the 12th.
Right, I'm really sorry. We're going to leave the questions there. That's because Jeremy and John and the rest of the team are fanning out across key seats the rest of this afternoon. I think Jeremy's got several rallies ending up in my constituency later on this evening as well. So I think you will all agree that that's a really exciting and real and meaningful agenda that we can all get behind and sell on the doorstep over the coming weeks. So can I thank you all again for coming? Can you all one final time please show your appreciation for John and Jeremy